talk about Atlantis and where Atlantis was situated, and if we look at Plato's testimony, and then also other cultures in the world that talk about a great civilization that lived off the coast of Africa, off the coast of the Sahara, and into the Atlantic Ocean, you would think that Morocco would be probably one of the first resorts of the places that the Atlanteans would go through in order to get to Egypt, right? And I'm going to assume that you guys know some of these stories here, but I'll go deeper into it and piece together as we go through the presentation. But there's been, speculation and a belief that Egypt was a colony of Atlantis. And Thoth from Egypt, also known as Thoth the Atlantean, was an individual that traveled around the world after the fall of Atlantis and supposedly was part of Atlantis there and had taken these the Emerald Tablets and also information on how to rebuild civilization and took it around the whole planet. So if Egypt was a colony of Atlantis, why don't we include the rest of North Africa? Is it the case that the Atlanteans, when they left Atlantis and went into different parts of the world and went through North Africa into Egypt, that they skip over Morocco, Algeria, and the whole Sahara Desert? Or is there a possibility? Is there a possibility that the Sahara Desert, also known as the least excavated place on the entire planet, could have evidence of Atlantis? When I first woke up to all this information, 2001, my first question that I had was, what is the root of all religion? What is the root of all religion? That's what I wanted to know. Everything that I've ever created on Portal to Ascension started with that original question. And it was because I was raised Hindu. And as a Hindu, I was never told my religion was the only religion. I was open to every religion. I believed in Jesus. I believed in Moses. There was a lot of different faiths, and I saw all these similarities. So since I saw similarities, I was like, well, if we go back far enough, and if maybe a story like Adam and Eve is true, which, that's a whole other story. It's more like two different tribes that existed rather than two different humans, a woman and a male. If these stories are true, then can we go back far enough when there are lesser people on the planet that we all had a common faith that all faiths came from? So as I was exploring that, I found the Sumerian scriptures, but in parallel to me finding the Sumerian scriptures, I also came across the information on Atlantis, because the cycles of time and the fact that we have evolved and devolved in consciousness and we're going into a golden age was one of the first aspects of ascension that I came across. And when I came across the fact that we're going into golden age, I also heard information that we had already been in a golden age and Atlantis supposedly existed within it. So the first elements I became aware of when I became conscious, the mysticism and curiosity, what is our true history and how we've been lied to, made me dive deep into this topic. Humans have been, realization number one, humans have been on Earth much longer than we've been told. We go through cycles of time and consciousness. We're able to go deeper into all these. There's a devolution and an evolution going on, right? We devolve to evolve. Could consciousness be connected to advanced ancient civilizations? Meaning, when we look at ancient civilizations and we look at the advancements of them, why do we automatically prescribe our level of advancement on what we need to perceive in the ancient past for them to be advanced? Why did they need to have a computer? Why do they need to have a computer chip? Why do we need to see certain technologies? Why are we looking for flying craft? Even though some of these civilizations probably did have that. It could advancements of the ancient civilizations be a consciousness advancement rather than a technological advancement. And when you have an advancement in consciousness, is it possible that that level of technology, conscious technology, doesn't require you to have all these external devices in order to get some sort of gratification from it, satisfaction from it? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're at that level of higher consciousness, do we need all these bells and whistles in order to explore reality? Or do we have an inner knowing that allows us to live a simpler life but have a higher level of consciousness? And could that have happened in the ancient past? Was there a time where humanity could communicate and interact with the stars and beings from other worlds? That happened when I got into the Sumerian scriptures, because, it was a verbatim. Take the Old Testament is almost verbatim, the Sumerian scriptures, but instead of God, it's a plural for goddesses, and it talks about beings from the stars. So why do we have an arrogance of thinking we are the most advanced we've ever been? Why is that? That was one of the first things. Wow, if we've been advanced before, it's almost like we're blindsided by the fact that we think we're so advanced now, and we see everything so linearly that we don't even give it the time of day to realize that there could have been some sort of advancement in the past. It's like not even within people's frequency. They can't even begin to fathom that. So does time evolve linearly? I noticed in the early days that ancient scriptures from around the world would speak of times going in cycles, right? The Maya would speak about this, the Aztecs speak about this, the ancient Chinese scriptures, the Indian scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, all talks about time being cyclical. So how does that make sense? How does that make sense if we are progressing linearly into the future? Because there's a past, present, and future. So if time is cyclical, why are we only seeing it as a progression into the future? In the Hindu scriptures, which at that point wasn't Hindu, it was Vedic awareness before it even became Hindu. In Hindu cosmology, time is divided into 4 yuga cycles. Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the current age, and that's categorized by moral and spiritual decline of corruption, right? I don't have to explain that too much. These yuga cycles are said to repeat in a cyclical manner over and over and over. People have different timelines for this, but it's generally around 25,000 years to 26,000 years. And there's around 13,000 years of ascension, and then there's 13,000 years of descension. Over here, this graph at the bottom is actually a really cool graph. If you guys look back at this, it actually has multiple cycles, the astrological cycle, the Vedic cycle, and the Mayan calendar cycle, all superimposed over each other. So the Mayans have something called a long count calendar. They developed a calendar system, including the long count calendar, which tracks time in cycles. The long count calendar consists of various units such as Batun, Katun, and Tun, and is believed to represent long cycles of time and significant historical events. And then we also have the astrological one that I just mentioned, which is the precession of the equinoxes. The precession of the equinoxes refers to the slow backward movement of the Earth's axis, resulting in a shift in the position of stars over a long period of time. This astronomical phenomena has been observed and studied by many ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, Greeks, and Hindus. It's important to really point out here that these cycles are so long. And if we were to live 100 years or less, or just a little bit more, for us to be able to observe these cycles and the precession is very, very challenging for someone who has a short period of life, because within that 100 years, it doesn't look like time is cyclical, it looks like it's linear. But when you start expanding it over thousands of years, you start seeing the precession of the equinoxes and the Earth's axis and the position of the stars over a long period of time. You start noticing that. So that goes into the question of, did these beings live longer? Did they perceive it like this? Was this information handed down to them from some sort of advanced beings? Or did they tap into some sort of realm through meditation or other types of practices that allowed them to really understand how this works? We have, just to continue with some more cycles of time in ancient cultures, we have the Aztec sunstone, also known as the Aztec calendar stone, is a massive stone monument depicting various cycles of time, including the agricultural, ceremonial, and cosmic cycles. It represents the Aztec worldview of time, of repeating cycles. And then, of course, one that a lot of people know, which is the Hopi prophecy. The Hopi people have a prophecy known as the 9 signs of destruction that refers to a series of cycles and events marking the end of one world age and the beginning of another, right? So even they're saying it, one age ends, the beginning of another. These signs are believed to herald significant changes around the world. All these ancient civilizations were all talking about the same thing. Cycles within their own metaphors, within their own culture, within their own surroundings, using those whatever they knew as their reality in order to explain the same situation that were going on the planet. We go through cycles. These cycles have beginnings and ends. When we end one cycle, a new one begins, and there's specific themes that are associated to each of these cycles. There's the great year. Even Plato said it. In Plato's philosophy, the great year, also known as the Platonic year, is a cycle of approximately 25,920 years. It is believed to be the time it takes for Earth's axis to complete a full rotation, precession of the equinox. So as I was really deep into the cycles of time info, I started having more questions. Well, does the short lifespan we have on Earth limit us to only being able to perceive time as linearly, since we do not remember our past accomplishments? We do not remember our past advancements. And not to forget, the theme of amnesia. Is the theme of amnesia within the Kali Yuga not allowing us to remember the advancement of our past? Does our limited perspective and lower consciousness inhibit us from realizing we are going in cycles and have the ability to break free from them? And the question of them all, did the earth reset after a great flood, wiping out so many advancements that the stories of the ancient world went from a reality to a myth? And was this Noah's flood, right? This was also around 2002, 2003, when I found out about the Epic of Gilgamesh. There's all these flood stories everywhere in the world. Was Noah's flood story the same as these other flood stories? And did we not only suffer amnesia, fall from grace, and have a shorten our lifespan, all these things stacked on top of each other, but also was there a great flood that literally traumatized us so deeply that it became a huge myth of the echoes of the past, of this great flood that existed, but maybe it was based on some reality. And at this point, I'm completely convinced it was, and there's enough evidence on the mainstream even, right now what's going on in the world, like this information is becoming mainstream, that there was a great flood, a deluge. And I'm not going to go over all of these, I'll just speak on a few here, but we have great floods in almost every ancient culture. Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Sumerian tale recounts devastating floods sent by the gods. The hero builds an ark and survives with his family and various animals. Sound familiar? Ancient Egypt. Inscriptions found in the Edfu temple depict the story of a great flood where the god Ra sends destruction upon humanity. The floodwaters eventually recede, allowing life to flourish once again. Ancient India. The Matsya Purana, part of Hindu mythology, tells the story of a flood that engulfs the world. The hero Manu is warned by a fish, which is an avatar, a reincarnation of Lord Vishnu, and builds a massive boat to preserve life. Ancient Greece, the tale of Dulation and Pyrrha, a catastrophic flood that Zeus sends to punish humanity. The couple is instructed by the Titan Prometheus to repopulate the earth by casting stones behind them, which transform into humans. Now, just a little side note there, when we hear stories like stones and clay, right, the use of stones and clay, a lot of times those, in my own opinion and many other researchers' opinions, actually happen to do with genetic manipulation or cloning of ancient civilization in ancient past. Ancient China, Chinese mythology and historical records include the legends of the Great Flood. The Emperor Yu successfully manages the floodwaters through extensive engineering and water control measures, earning him the admiration and trust of his people. And the ancient indigenous Americans, numerous Native American tribes have flood stories in their oral traditions. And there was hundreds of indigenous tribes in the Americas. And many, many of them, if not almost all of them, had a flood story. These tales often feature a deity or supernatural being warning a chosen few to build a vessel or find refuge to surviving the deluge. When I was figuring this out, and it was just like, okay, wait a second. All these ancient civilizations, there's monotheistic religions, there's pagan religions, there's this indigenous wisdom. We've been told that they've all evolved differently and separately from each other. Monotheism has always been based on this monotheistic deity, and the polytheistic religions are completely separate from each other. But how come all these stories are so similar? And not just so similar, some of them have the exact same circumstance in there, even the ark, even the animals, the location of these floods. Is there some sort of commonality that we can find by looking into these flood stories? We have the ancient Persia, Zoroastrian texts talk about the flood, the mention of the myth of Yima and the flood. We have ancient Israel in the Hebrew Bible. Of course, this one, everybody probably knows of the story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood. Ancient Mayans, the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation myth includes a flood event. The gods create multiple failed human beings. The gods create multiple failed human beings until finally fashioning humans out of maize dough. Another cloning or genetic manipulation story. However, these humans angered the gods, leading to a destructive flood. Reset. Mainstream is now realizing that the face of the earth has shifted so many times that we need to really put this into account, when we start looking at ancient civilizations and pole shifts and the populations of Earth, migration routes, and things like that. And I'm definitely not going to read these ones. But just to let you know how deep the flood stories go, I've added another 26 of them here. Okay? I'll leave this on for a second. Just so when you watch this replay, you can pause it, look back. The Hurrian, the Hittites, the Norse, the Finnish, the Russians, the Lithuanians, Estonian, Latvian, Welsh, Cornish, Irish, Scottish, Phoenician, Canaanite, Nubian, Ethiopian, Maori, Polynesian, Hawaiian, Tahitian, Navajo, Iroquois, Inuit, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indonesian, Burmese, all of them. And there were many, 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 many more. Okay, I just pulled down a few of them. So here's my question to you guys. Could there be a collective trauma that humanity went through that involved a great flood that wiped out an advanced global civilization? Is there a possibility, right? Because many conventional people, after even knowing all the stuff that we just said, still don't even believe that there could have been a great civilization that got wiped out from this. The evidence suggests yes. There is something called the Younger Dryas period, a climactic event that occurred approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago during the final stages of the last ice age. It is named after a cold-tolerant flower called Dryas octopetala, if I said that right, octopetala, which flourished during periods in parts of Europe and North America. The Younger Dryas was characterized by a rapid and severe cooling of the Earth's climate, resulting in a return to near glacial conditions. It followed the relatively warmer period. Robert Schock, who we've had many times on Portal to Ascension, speculates through his research that there were solar flares that contributed to this, whereas other research, such as Graham Hancock, believes it was an asteroid impact. The end of the Younger Dryas coincided with a period of significant global climate change, including rising sea levels due to melting ice sheets. These environmental changes could have resulted in flooding in certain regions. And did you guys know that actually, scientifically speaking, we're still in a mini ice age? 11,900 years ago, the major ice age ended, right? That was when we had the Great Flood. That was when supposedly the fall of Atlantis occurred. That was when there was a global warming. Maybe there's an asteroid, maybe there's a solar flare, maybe it was both. And after that occurred, we still remained in an ice age, but now we're in a mini ice age. So the warming of the planet isn't just connected to, what we've been told the warming is, but is definitely also part of the fact that the mini ice age is also on its way out. When we talk about Atlantis, we have to talk about Plato, because he's like, other cultures never even called it Atlantis. He's the one who got the information from who he said was originally from Egypt about the civilization of Atlantis, right? So much of what we know, the circular structure of the city, the main city, the location of Atlantis, and the type of people were there, and their technology comes from Plato. According to the accounts given by Plato, who first mentioned Atlantis in his dialogues, Atlantis was said to have existed 9,000 years before his own time, around 11,900 years ago. Plato described Atlantis as an advanced civilization that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, commonly associated with the Strait of Gibraltar. He mentioned that Atlantis was a dominant maritime empire until it faced a catastrophic event and sank. And just to show you guys, I put in a map here, a map of the ancient world, if you will, and then a map from Google Maps. You can see here, let's look at the first one, the ancient world. This is the area in which Plato was speaking about. Here, the Pillar of Hercules, and right beyond it, which is right off the coast of Morocco, is supposedly where Atlantis was. Now, I'm leaning towards the fact that Atlantis was a global civilization, but the main city, the main capital, or the main island was right off that area right there. And maybe Atlantis, as we know and we're told about, maybe it wasn't even the name, okay? And if it wasn't even the name, maybe that one specific area was talking about the main hub, main capital of it. but it was actually a worldwide pyramid culture. So Atlantis, according to Plato, this is what he thought of Atlantis, right? Or what he believed from his own insights and information he was given. Powerful and prosperous, Atlantis was depicted as a wealthy and mighty empire with a highly developed and sophisticated society. Advanced architecture. The city of Atlantis was said to have been constructed with grand architectural designs featuring impressive structures and buildings. Engineering marvels. Atlantis supposedly possessed advanced engineering techniques, including the creation of intricate water channels, irrigation systems, and harbors. Advanced tech. The Atlanteans were believed to have harnessed advanced technologies and possess knowledge in various fields, including navigation, metallurgy, and agriculture. Wealth and resources. They were said to have abundant resources, including precious metals like gold, silver, and mythical metal described as being second in value only to gold. Naval power. They were masters of the sea. Intellectual pursuits. Plato also attributed philosophical and intellectual pursuits to them, suggesting that they possess knowledge of various disciplines and sciences. Just and virtuous society. For a long time, before the fall, Atlantean society was described as being initially, in caps bold, virtuous, with a well-organized political system and adherence to moral principles. The ancient Egyptians believed that the world began with the emergence of land from a watery chaos, and their civilization was established as a result of divine order and the efforts of gods and goddesses. Mainstream scholars believe that this does not relate to Atlantis, but I feel that in itself, the fact that they said that their civilization emerged from a watery chaos kind of goes into the whole flood story. What does all of this have to do with Morocco, everybody? Well, you thought that next slide would be Morocco, but not quite. The Sahara Desert, circa 12,900 BCE. Transition period from the last ice age. Global climate undergoing significant changes during that time, 12,900 BCE. Climate and landscape. There was increased precipitation in the Sahara region at this point. There was a presence of lakes, rivers, and abundant vegetation. Okay, this isn't a maybe. This isn't speculation. This is fact, right? Alternative and mainstream fact that it was a lush oasis. Imagine an ice age where the northern hemisphere iced over, the southern hemisphere iced over, and the most beautiful, luscious place to live around the equator, plus and minus how many thousands of miles, which includes not only the Mayan jungle, but also includes the Sahara Desert. So there was grasslands, wetlands, and patches of forest. Fossilized remains of hippos and crocodiles have been found there. Pollen analysis indicates grasses, shrubs, and trees. The Sahara region was more habitable and fertile, suitable conditions for diverse plant and animal life, a mosaic of ecosystems within the region. After the Younger Dryas period, which ended around 11,700 years ago, the Sahara region gradually transitioned from its more humid and grassy environment to the arid desert we know today. When this was happening, the gradual shift, there was a reduction of grasslands, wetlands, and forests. Expansion of arid conditions and drought-tolerant plants started coming about. Influence on human populations, a nomadic lifestyle of the populations in the area to the changing conditions. They didn't have the abundance that they had before, so they lived more of a nomadic style of life. There was migration to river regions with more favorable environments, including Egypt. Egypt was one of the last places to become part of the desert. Modern Sahara Desert, now we know it's a vast, arid landscape with limited vegetation, extreme temperatures, and scarce water supply. So, okay, here we go again. Well, what does this have to do with Morocco? So now let's talk about my journeys to Morocco. My ex-wife, Sol, and myself went to Morocco for a honeymoon. We were traveling across Europe. She's way into Moroccan stuff. And as a kid, just was into all that kind of style of things. And I never even thought twice about Morocco. And so before we had our big Indian wedding, like Indian style Punjabi wedding in England, we went on a honeymoon around Europe. And I decided, let me take her to Morocco because it's somewhere she's always wanted to be. So when we go there for a honeymoon, we're traveling across Europe as well to make our way to England. She had always been into Moroccan culture and it was somewhere she'd wanted to visit, so I made it happen. I was excited because I had heard all the stories of Atlantis, and from my own research, I felt that Egypt was a colony of Atlantis, and that the entirety of North Africa could have once been an extension of Kemet, aka Egypt, or even extension of Atlantis after or during its existence. We hear about the Greek Empire, we hear about the Persian Empire, the British Empire, the Roman Empire. We hear about all these empires. Why don't we hear anything about the Egyptian Empire? If Egypt was such a great civilization and lived for so long and was so powerful, and even the Greeks and the Romans want to take it over, why is there no information about Egypt being an empire? Well, my personal opinion is, just to make it very simple, is that the higher level of consciousness that came into that culture made it that they weren't trying to go out and conquer, but also it was actually much larger than it is right now. It was the whole of North Africa. And that's why so many different structures are starting to be found in the Sahara Desert. So I wanted to see if we could find evidence of the existence of Atlantis within the culture, archaeological sites, and the stories of ancient Morocco. Additionally, the gates of Gibraltar are there, right? The pillars of Hercules are right there. So Plato mentioned this. So there had to be some sort of evidence of Atlantis, right? So when we went there, I asked people there, multiple people, what existed before Islam? What did you worship then? The answers I got for one person was that they worshiped rocks and they had no religion, right? And at that point, I was like, what? Rocks? And then I started realizing that that was actually an organized religion tactic to make people who worship nature feel like they were crazy and had no religion. When people say they worship rocks, it actually means that they had reverence for nature and the natural environment. The first trip, we literally discovered nothing, but we also did not have enough time to do some true exploring. So we went back a second time. The second trip. So our friend at the Riyadh, he now owned his own touring company and around Morocco. So he offered Sol and I an all expense trip around the whole of Morocco, like 12 days, hotels free, food free, everything. And we jumped onto it. So from north to south to east to west. And this was a great opportunity to do some exploring with the sole intent to see if we could find connections to Atlantis. So this time I wasn't just trying to like go and just explore and just be. I was like, all right, we're gonna go see all this stuff. Let's go with the intention to find connections here. So let's go into some exploration of those connections. Well, the Berber people, we got to mention the Berber people because they're the natives, quote unquote, of that area. The Berbers are the indigenous people of North Africa, a territory that extends from present-day Morocco in the west of Africa to Libya in the east. The Berbers are also settled throughout the Saharan and sub-Saharan area in Mali, Sudan, and Mauritania. The Maghreb region in Northwest Africa is believed to have been inhabited by Berbers from at least 10,000 BC. Cave paintings, which have been dated to 12 millennia before present, have been found. So that is so far ago, and that's only 1,000 years or so after the fall of Atlantis, and right in the heyday of Egypt and the Sphinx and the advancements over there. Maybe there would be a connection to the Berber people. So a lot of the information here, I'm just really excited because a lot of the information here I've never seen pieced together before, and no one's ever looked at the Berber if they have a connection to Atlantis. And there is no research on the Berbers and the connection to the ancient Greeks. And it's because of religion, Islam, and then the Western religion, the Greek Orthodox Church. No one wants to even give it the time of day to see the similarities because people are so focused on what divides them. Berber mythology greatly influenced the lives of Moroccans and the neighboring Amazigh community in North Africa. They revered and celebrated their own set of heroes and deities. Morocco shared certain mythologies with the Romans and the Greeks. The Amazigh communities residing in this ancient land embraced these myths, holding their heroes in high regard and offering devotion to their gods for countless generations. Many of these legendary heroes were giants, titans, were believed to have a dwelling in North Africa at one point, leaving their mark on various cities in the region, including Tangier in Morocco and Libya. One of these deities had the name Atlas to the Greeks. Tangier is where the gates of Gibraltar is. So when I started finding this out, and I heard about giants dwelling in North Africa right before they were 10,000 BC plus, and they have a counterpart to Atlas, who was the king of Atlantis. So that really started making me get even more and more curious. These deities are so much in common with other places in the world. We got Anzar, which is the god of rain, which is Anshar in the Israeli text before it became Yahweh, which is a deity from the Pleiades. Okay, we have Draco. Okay, we have let's find some other ones you guys might know. We have Isis. The Berbers had the goddess Isis as well. So it was a combination of so many different deities and gods, and they were definitely connected to other cultures around the area, including Atlantis, what I feel was Atlantis. But what has happened is the Berber communities now have completely been Islamified, that it's very difficult to even find this information. You need to do some deep research online just to be able to piece it together. There's not even one place with just a full list of all this. And you go and talk to Berber people, and Berber people, even though they're Islamic light, for lack of a better term, because they still have the passion in them. Their songs are about love, whereas the Arabic songs in Morocco are all about religion, all about Islam. The Berber music in Morocco still has passion and love in it, things that are actually considered taboo in Islam. So they kept their personality, they kept their passion, they kept their I don't even know what else, they kept some sort of their culture that wasn't washed down by Islam. However, their faith now has become so Islamic that they don't give reverence to the ancient deities, and it's not a part of the culture anymore. So they have their own flood story, the Berbers. And in their oral traditions, it recounts a great deluge that covered the land, leading to widespread destruction and the need for survival. The details of the story often include a divine or supernatural intervention, such as the displeasure of a deity or the actions of a hero or spiritual figure who helps the people navigate or escape the floodwaters. The hero was Hercules, and in the Berber tradition, I'm going to try to say this, Ur-Mumu. I think I got it right. Ur-Mumu. That was Hercules in the Berber tradition. So a lot of times we have these different deities with different names, and it's actually almost considered to be completely different cultures. But from just a little to actually sometimes deeper research, you find out that they're the exact same person. So now we're going to go into a deeper dive onto this figure of Ur-Mumu, aka Hercules. So now we're traveling around Morocco. And as we go to Tangier, our friend takes us to this place called Hercules Grotto, which means the caves of Hercules. And immediately my interest is piqued, because you go there, 95% to 99% of everybody there are Islamic tourists, local Moroccans, people from North Africa going there to see it. Don't care who Hercules is, probably don't even really know too much about the history and how Hercules is connected to it, and goes to this beautiful site just because it's really great, amazing, beautiful area. And all of a sudden we're in this Hercules grotto, and I'm thinking, wow, Greeks, Atlantis, Plato, demigods, even connection to the Anunnaki. There's two tiers of gods in Nibiru, the Anunnaki and the Igigi. The Igigi were the demigods. Hercules was an Igigi, a demigod. So there's all these different connections starting to happen in my mind. And just want to take a moment here and just show you some of the views from this caves of Hercules. These caves are believed to have been formed naturally over thousands of years and associated with a legendary story involving the mythical hero Hercules. So this is looking out exactly to where Plato said Atlantis was. According to local legends and mythology, it is said that Hercules, as a part of his 12 labors, traveled to this region. He rested in the area and took a liking to the caves, which were then opened to the sea. The story goes, Hercules separated the land masses of Europe and Africa by pushing his way through the mountains, creating the Straits of Gibraltar. Okay, so many other dots are being connected right now. Pushing the land masses of Europe and Africa. See that similar kind of story when we talk about flood myths, and we'll get into the mountain range over there and how that's connected to Atlantis in a second, and you'll see even more dots being connected. But Europe and Africa, it's almost like there was a flood that split that together, and Hercules, this giant that also represents a connection to this ancient culture, pushed his way through the mountains, creating the Strait of Gibraltar, like a flood pushing through the Straits of Gibraltar. And then, of course, Gibraltar being something that Plato was referring to when he was speaking about Hercules. So inside the caves, there are two main chambers. the larger one known as the Grotto of Hercules, and that features a natural opening that resembles the shape of the map of Africa when viewed from a certain angle. The smaller chamber is called the map room and is also known for its unique formations. So according to Greek myth, humanity had become wicked and corrupt. The gods, displeased with this state of affairs, decided to punish humankind by unleashing a massive flood. Hercules' lineage is significant to the story. The son Deucalion, the son of the Titan Prometheus, and the mortal Clymene was the husband of Pyrrha and the father of Helen. Deucalion was the half-brother of Hercules, as they shared the same father. As the floodwaters began to rise, Deucalion and Pyrrha were warned by Prometheus about the impending disaster. He instructed them to build an ark or a large chest in which they could seek refuge. They followed his advice, and as the floodwaters covered the land, they drifted in the ark for 9 days and nights until they came to rest on Mount Parnassus. After the flood receded and the couple disembarked from the ark, they realized they were the only survivors on Earth. Seeking guidance, they consulted an oracle how they could repopulate the world. The oracle instructed them to cast the bones of their mother behind their shoulders. Same as the stone story, basically. Deucalion and Pyrrha interpreted the cryptic message as referring to the earth as their mother. They began to throw stones or bones from the earth over their shoulders, and wherever the stones landed, human beings sprang forth. The stones thrown by Deucalion became men, and those by Pyrrha were women. Thus, the earth was repopulated by their offspring. So this myth's survival and the subsequent repopulation of the world is often associated with the concept of renewal and the idea of humanity's rebirth after a catastrophic event. While Hercules is not involved in the story, my feeling and understanding from being in Morocco was Hercules also escaped, and he actually went with a group of giants from Atlantis to the caves of Hercules. After that, we go to the Atlas Mountains. So Atlas and Hercules are associated with the same event, the 12 labors of Hercules, in which Hercules performed a series of extraordinary tasks as a form of penance for his past misdeeds. So this was such a huge story when I heard this. One of Hercules' labors was to retrieve the golden apples for the garden of Hesperides. These golden apples were guarded by Hesperides' nymphs, who were the daughters of Atlas, the Titan. However, the location of the garden was not known, and Hercules needed guidance to find where it was. So to aid Hercules in his quest, the hero sought out Atlas, who was known for his immense strength and knowledge of the world. Atlas was also famous for his role in holding up the heavens on his shoulders, a punishment he received after the war between Titans and Olympian gods. So now I'm feeling that this is a story of the fall of Atlantis. And there's other people that talk about this too, even deeper. So we have Atlas. Atlas is holding up the earth, and the representation of Atlas holding up the earth is actually a metaphor for the Earth's axis shifting to 23.5 degrees after a pole shift that occurred 13,000 years ago at the end of the Younger Dryas, in which there was a great flood. So the story of Atlas holding up the earth is him basically being responsible for still holding the earth up on his shoulders after we actually fell from grace. And so this story here, Hercules needed to find the golden apples, but Atlas's daughters stole them. So now we get into the story of the golden apples. The golden apples are actually a story from Atlantis of this technology that was in Atlantis that was taken away. Hercules made a deal with Atlas. He offered to hold up the heavens in Atlas' place while Atlas went to retrieve the golden apples from the garden where his daughters took them after the fall of Atlantis. Atlas, relieved to have his burden lifted temporarily, agreed to Hercules' proposal. However, when Atlas returned with the apples, he reconsidered taking the weight of the heavens upon himself again. So Atlas found his daughters. He found the technology, and Hercules was stuck holding the earth. And Atlas was like, actually, I don't want to come back and hold the earth up anymore. You do it, Hercules. So at this point, Hercules cleverly tricked Atlas. He asked Atlas to hold the heavens momentarily so that he could readjust his cloak as padding on his shoulders. As soon as Atlas agreed and took the heavens back on his shoulders, Hercules quickly grabbed the golden apples and he left, leaving Atlas once again to bear the burden of the fall from grace. The golden apples, an advanced technology from Atlantis. So now we have the golden apples out of Atlantis into Morocco, story with Hercules and Atlas going on there, the Atlas Mountains, and then information that the technology inside of the Ark of the Covenant was actually a quantum generating device that were known as the golden apples. So could this golden apple technology from Atlantis have been what has been placed in the Ark of the Covenant and was some sort of advanced technology? Atlas had 8 daughters with Pleione, the goddess nymph, Calypso, and 7 Pleiades. The daughters of Atlas were the 7 names of the Pleiadian star system. Some theories suggest that each of the daughters and each star of the Pleiades represents a different seeding of Earth or a different civilization after Atlantis, that each of those 7 is a different seeding. I used to think it was a different hominin species, but now I'm thinking there were 7 tribes of Atlantis that represent one of the golden apples, maybe crystal skulls, maybe some sort of advanced quantum technology that were taken to different parts of the world to repopulate the planet. We even have the goddess Teril in Berber mythology as a powerful sorceress and dangerous ogress from traditional mythology in Berber civilization, a frightening, cannibalistic ancient goddess. It is said that she gained immense magical abilities after ingesting a golden leaf from the Tree of Life and Destiny in Atala, a parallel dimension. Tree of Life, golden leaf. What did the Tree of Life have in the Garden of Eden? Apples. The Garden of Eden story, an apple from a tree. The Garden of Eden being a higher dimensional aspect of Earth. The Garden of Eden being Atlantis before we fell from grace. This is what I was thinking. Legend says that the Atlas Mountains are petrified. So if that wasn't enough, I'm going over the Atlas Mountains, right? I wish I had more time to tell you guys these stories. As I was going over the mountain, I realized that the story of the Atlas Mountains is that it's the petrified body of Atlas as he was escaping Atlantis. The Atlas Mountains is actually known scientifically to hold the earth together by separating Europe and Africa. Okay, remember the story of Hercules pushing apart Europe and Africa? The Atlas Mountains, named after King Atlas from Atlantis, petrified body of Atlas, is actually the mountain range that holds the Europe and African continents together based on scientific understanding, literally. The Atlas Mountains are formed by tectonic activity and are situated at the boundary between Africa and Eurasian tectonic plates. The movement and collision of these plates have played a significant role in shaping the Earth's crust in this region. The convergence of African and Eurasian plates has led to the uplift of the Atlas Mountains, which has contributed to the geological separation between Europe and Africa. The Strait of Gibraltar, located in the western end of the Mediterranean Sea, is the result of this tectonic activity from the Atlas Mountains and is often associated between the division of Europe and Africa. So there's so many dots connecting. So in Greek mythology, Atlas is a Titan and a race of deities originally worshipped by ancient Greeks. But in North Africa, he is the figure behind the name of Morocco's largest mountain range. Others call him King of Mauritania, the Latin word for the ancient Maghreb, which stretched from present-day Algeria to Morocco. The myth tells us that Zeus, god of sky and thunder in Greek mythology, condemned Atlas to hold the heavens forever as a punishment because famous Atlas stood to perform his task at the westernmost end of the world, known to the ancient Greeks. The ocean near him was called the Atlantic Ocean in his honor. But this was not the only thing that linked the Titan god to Morocco. Other accounts suggest that the Atlas Mountains are the remains of Atlas. So my question is this the story of a great reset that happened on the planet? And if we're going through all these cycles over and over and over again, and we're only looking at the last great reset, how many resets have we had? How many resets have there been? There is a collective trauma or memory or a type of greatness in our ancient past. Advanced civilizations such as Egypt appeared from nowhere from seemingly primitive tribes. Did a group of individuals travel the world to provide technology and advancements to humanity after this great fall? Quetzalcoatl, Thoth, so many others, stories and similar stories of these beings going around the planet, providing insights, telling them how to build, helping construct pyramids, helping them construct Teotihuacan, and so much more. And then we have Nabu in Babylonian, Saraswati in Hindu, Odin in the Norse, Quetzalcoatl, all these stories of these beings that went around the world basically teaching them on how to rebuild civilization, how to read, write, and all that. So how many times was there a reset? How do we break free from this cycle? Is there an end of karma? And are these cycles connected to a matrix or a construct we signed up for? And is now the time to continue evolving without falling from grace?